Hey everybody, and we are back. It is Jack Murphy, and this is the Jack Murphy Live podcast. You can find me on Twitter at Jack Murphy Live, at the website at jackmurphylive.com. Jack Murphy Live everywhere, guys. Also, I got the book Democrat to Deplorable. Please go get one of those on Amazon. But enough of all that already. Today I have a tremendous guest. Somebody who is really out there moving and shaking and making things happen. Somebody who has been grinding hard, making a name for himself, and recently has got some excellent first-class news and a presentation of a new venture. I'm really excited to have my good friend and a repeat guest on Jack Murphy Live here in studio at the Jack Murphy Live podcast headquarters. My good friend, Will Chamberlain. How you doing, Will?
Doing fantastic. Good to be back.
It's awesome. It's great to have you. And everybody, just FYI, I know if you follow me on Twitter, you know that I've got a brand new little puppy. Her name is Rosie. And she's right here with us. And she's being really chill and quiet right now. But at some point, she may do her puppy thing. And we're just going to roll with it because we're keeping it real here at Jack Murphy Live. Right. We're keeping it real. And so if you hear that puppy barking in the background, just go, oh, that's so cute. Because we are just going to keep on going. All right, so this has been a big week, right. The last week or 10 days. We have all had a great time at CPAC. There was people in from all over the world, literally. Right. It was like a summit of conservative thinkers, right-wing thinkers, new media types, the whole gamut. Mm-hmm. Will, did you have a good time this last weekend?
Oh, yeah. No, I had a great time. Met a whole ton of people I hadn't met before, some of whom I had interacted in the past with on Twitter, some of whom I'd barely interacted with, like right before CPAC started. I think on Wednesday of last week, I had lunch with Jack Periscope, who's my close friend, but Paul Joseph Watson, Andrew Cobra Tate. I don't know. I think he's still on Twitter. I won't use his name.
Don't use the name. Don't get him banned again. That's right. Cobra Tate.
Cobra Tate.
I had a chance to hang out with him too. That guy is a real deal.
Yeah, he's intense and very funny.
Very funny. His brother too.
Funny. Yeah, same.
Yeah, cool guys.
But that was pretty wild because I had discussions with Paul. Like Paul and I knew each other and had followed each other's work for almost a year now, I would say, or maybe about six or 7 months probably. And but it was good to finally meet him in person.
This is Paul Joseph Watson, formerly or currently of InfoWars?
I think he's still a contributor. I don't know if he's actually employed by them.
Okay.
But like on his YouTube, it looks like he's doing his own thing now.
Yeah.
So
famous for his very hard-hitting and insightful videos on current subjects. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Powerful social media voice for sure.
Yeah. No, and very effective at the sort of medium of the YouTube. What do you call it? It's not a rant. It's a polemic.
Polemic. Oh, I like rant better. Polemic sounds stuffy.
Yeah, but he's British. I it's funny, like the British language, British rhetoric, I would say, influences a lot of the way I talk because of, John Le Carre is my favorite novelist. Yes Minister is my favorite sitcom. So
got it.
I appreciate the style.
Right. Biting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I had a chance to meet him too, and he, like Andrew Tate, taller than I was expecting.
Yeah, very tall.
Very tall. There was some very cool pictures of us at Mike Cernovich's Night for Freedom, and Will, not a short guy either. Jack Periscope, not a short guy either. And then Ivan Throne was there, and Tristan Tate, and we're all in this picture together with Paul too, and like every dude, 6 foot and way over.
Yeah. No, like I think 6'2" at minimum.
At minimum.
Right. Yeah. Like. If Cernovich would have showed up, he would have been the shortest person. Like he's like 5'11" or 6 foot.
We'll say 6 foot.
We'll give him 6 foot. But he would have easily been the shortest person among that group.
Easily. That was a really good time. So tell me, who else did you meet at CPAC? What did you see go down at CPAC? Anything of note?
I didn't actually see. It was kind of boring for the most part in terms of the actual substantive speeches. I only watched about 2 or 3. I thought Michelle Malkin's speech was certainly the highlight. I thought she spit fire.
What was she talking about? Most people don't know, I don't think.
So Michelle Malkin just gave a speech and got up there and immediately made the point of saying, I'm going to go long because there's only one panel on immigration, and that's ridiculous because it is the most important issue that we face.
Right.
So she made a big point of talking about the harms of illegal immigration and of overextensive legal immigration. And so, she's an immigration restrictionist. And it was, a very powerful speech. She made the point of, aggressively mocking and criticizing almost every previous Republican administration from Bush onwards. and other people as well, Romney, and even the ghost of John McCain, which apparently made people very angry.
You're not allowed to criticize a dead guy?
Apparently not.
Oh.
Apparently not.
I don't think the left got that message.
No. I mean, well, like many things, it's where, suddenly people who are useful to the left become, oh, that guy was so great. I have a strange new respect for John McCain.
John McCain and George Bush, too.
Yeah, George Bush especially.
Yeah, but they haven't gotten to that point yet with Ronald Reagan yet, have they?
No, I don't think they have a strange new respect for Ronald Reagan.
No, they definitely don't. They definitely don't. But I love how George Bush has become like the left's new teddy bear.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, he's such an old, lovable guy,
right,
who started the Iraq War.
He's just a painter now.
Destroyed our foreign policy for 15 years. What a wonderful old man.
He's got no love within the conservative right now. So, I think people sort of look back on him as being a total fucking disaster.
Yeah, I think that whole era of conservatism is looked on with kind of shame, and it just wasn't really that present. If you actually went around CPAC and you looked at who was there, there's sort of a Trump takeover of CPAC.
Yeah.
And something of a nationalist takeover too.
Yeah.
There's still, plenty of kind of older school ideas, but they're finding themselves trying to fit into the modern conservatism rather than there being this uneasy tension. I think that there was a lot of tension last year, but this year, for example, we had the social media censorship panel this year.
Right. And last year, I remember it was stuffed into a teeny tiny off room where there was, half of the people were in there were like guys in our crew. And then there was like another 30 people sort of stuffed in this tiny little room.
Right.
Where was it this year?
Main stage.
And
it wasn't just Harmeet Dillon, who was on it last year.
Right.
First speaker was Josh Hawley, Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri, who was extremely woke on issues of social media censorship and regulating big tech. It's shows you how far we've gone in about a year, where the idea of maybe we need to regulate these guys has gone from this fringe, ridiculous, non-conservative idea to a part of the conservative platform. And there's a lot of things you can point to, like our work with the petition that we got started about 6 months ago.
Explain that a little bit.
So about 6 months ago, we started a formal White House petition to stop the bias, #StopTheBias, and try and demand that new laws be passed that prohibit social media companies from banning lawful speech, right? My view, and it continues to be my view, is that you should have the same right to speak on Twitter that you do in a public park. And I feel like that's pretty simple but controversial.
Is there any legal precedent for something like that?
No, people make arguments that there is a legal precedent using cases like Packingham, and if we really want to get into the weeds of why I don't think that case actually supports, you're shaking your head.
Yeah,
we don't want to get into the weeds.
No,
but the basic I think we actually do need new laws. And I take the aggressive position here that we should use government power to achieve conservative ends, and existing law is a tough fit with what we need in terms of social media companies. So we should write new law to protect conservative speech online.
Okay. Now, sort of in the same context of CPAC having a transformation revolution, is this a transformation revolution in conservative thinking, that you're going to use the government to regulate the markets?
Perhaps. It's not. Depends on what type of conservative you're thinking about. If you classify Teddy Roosevelt as a conservative, he's the originator of antitrust law. I think, I've read some biographies of Teddy Roosevelt in the past year and really sort of empathize with him a lot. There was an attitude that the idea of regulating John Rockefeller was preposterous among Republicans. And he's like, no, actually, it's sort of ridiculous that this one guy has more power than the federal government, or could have more power than the federal government by virtue of his ownership of everything related to the single source of energy in our country.
Right.
And that we ought stop that. We ought use the power of the government to say no to that.
Right.
And also I think to take a stand on principle against the idea of social media censorship and big tech regulation, you're going to be arguing against civil rights laws. That's what you're going to be arguing against at the end of the day, because the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was a serious infringement on the private property rights of restaurant owners, hotels, etc., right? Saying that you don't have the freedom of association you used to. And the reason we did that is we said, you know what? Yes, there's an infringement on freedom of association, but stopping racism is more important.
Right. A public good, a common good.
It's a public good. And, we're tired. There's a great anecdote from Lyndon Johnson's biographies by Robert Caro, where apparently one of Lyndon Johnson's employees, a black man, had the job of driving his favorite car, all the way from Washington, D.C. back to the hill country of Texas for when he took his vacations. And the story that was told was that there were plenty of stretches along the route that took him through the South where he just couldn't get a hotel or couldn't even use a bathroom. So he was, relieving himself on the side of the road because he's on the wrong race. And Johnson's like, you know what? That's fascinating about private property rights, but that needs to stop. That's going to end.
Yeah.
We're going to use government to end that. And I'm tired of waiting. We're not waiting for some invisible hand mechanism to solve that problem.
Right. So, this really begs, I don't know, begs the question, the right phrase. I think people misuse that term all the time.
Raises the question.
Yes, a question has risen in my mind now. It's a powerful thing to use the government to infringe upon civil liberties. Yes, private property rights, etc., for a common good. There has to be some sort of threshold, right? There has to be some sort of threshold by which it becomes more important. How do we judge? How do we judge whether or not it's now appropriate for the government to take away other people's sort of right to do what they want, whenever they want, however they want it, for the, quote, common good?
I mean, if I had an answer to that question, I would have solved political philosophy. Right?
I thought you had the answer. I thought that wasn't a softball question.
No, that was not a softball question. That's probably the hardest question in all of political philosophy, or one of the five. At what point is it justified to infringe on liberty? And not just in one particular instance, but as a general rule.
Well, let's think about it more practically speaking.
Yeah.
Like how, and we don't have to get too deep into this, but it definitely begs the questions in my head now.
Okay.
If we can't solve that question, then at least we can put like roadblocks or obstacles or hurdles or brakes or a governor on that. Like, do you have any fear that, we do it again and then you like the threshold gets lower next time?
No, the left wants socialism. That's already part of the mainstream discourse. Like the question is whether or not we're willing to do what's necessary to prevent them from having a complete stranglehold on politics so that they get it, right? If you're thinking, oh, well, if we do this, we might risk setting a precedent that the left will be able to abuse in the future. My argument would be, on the contrary, if we don't do this, we're risking not a precedent being set, but rather a political takeover and essentially a paradigm shift in the way politics works because of the dominance of the left over social media, in addition to every other institution they dominate. And if that happens, then the erosion of our liberties and the creep towards government intervention will increase far more dramatically than it will as the result of any precedent we create by regulating big tech now.
Fascinating. That's really fascinating. And one of the things that it brings up that I discussed on prior podcasts with John Robb, that our current sort of, call it a civil war or not. I mean, the current conflict that we have right now between the red insurgency, the resistance, and there's a third group, corporations. And right now it seems as though that the corporations and resistance have an alignment. Right. They have an alliance against the insurgency, and they're working together, not necessarily because they have common goals, but because they have common enemy. Sort of the same thing, but you understand the distinction.
Right.
To what extent does the insurgency becoming the ones that wants to crack down on corporations, thereby only further embolden that alliance against us and have them just sort of have a longer and stronger reason to be united in the war against us? Because I was talking with our friend Jack Posobiec the other day. Because one strategy is we have to like drive a wedge between the corporations and the resistance. I fear if we do it this way, we're just going to like solidify that alliance against us for like the next 10, 20 years to come.
So I think part of the reason there's two reasons that the corporations are on the resistance's side. One is a change in the geographic center of our economy to Silicon Valley, which is a deeply liberal place, right? And the staff of the most important corporations of the world is, derived from a place that's like 95% Democratic. And then the second is sort of a underlying shift in the parties whereby the Republicans have become more of a party of the working class than they were ever before. And there's this class divide manifests itself in people who were previously big business elites deciding that they're more aligned to the Democrats than otherwise. So I guess my answer to that is that I think those two dynamics mean that I don't think that we can change that. I don't think the prospect of putting a wedge between the corporations and the left is that will work that well, because at the end of the day, the people staffing these, personnel is policy, and the personnel despises the nationalist movement, thinks it's totally wrong and misguided. And I think, moreover, that it is not a bad thing to be on the wrong side of the corporations. I really don't think it's that bad. If we, in a world where we can make sure to use the government to ensure that we have access to social media, the ability of big money to influence elections is seriously constrained, right? Like one of the interesting things about modern politics, the left is so focused on campaign finance reform. To me, that's just, it's passé. It doesn't matter as much anymore because social media amplification, there's a little, money plays a little bit of a role, but Donald Trump spent 1/10 of what Hillary Clinton spent. So can we use the resources we have to put together a winning political coalition? And I think it's easier to put together a winning political coalition when you're defending the people against the corporations and not vice versa.
That's interesting. It's funny. I remember in the 90s, the WTO protests in Seattle. It was Antifa and Black Bloc. And then Occupy Wall Street and Occupy DC, Antifa, Black Bloc, all against corporations, corporate greed, big money, etc. Now, all of a sudden, Antifa, Black Bloc, all those guys, they're on the same team with the corporations. How the hell did that happen, Will?
Well, it turns out it's easier to beat your opponents and remove them from the public square, potentially, if you can get the corporations to do it for you. So they infiltrated them and staffed them up. So that is obviously the threat to having the corporations on the wrong side of you is that they might censor you, which is why we need to regulate big tech to prevent them from censoring us, right? If you said that we're not allowed to do that, then I'd say, well, then we need to figure out a way to get the corporations back on our side somehow. I don't know how if we don't have this control, because I don't know how to make Google conservative. I don't know how to make Facebook conservative or Twitter conservative. Like
you have to make it profitable to be conservative,
right? And even then, it's like cultural. It's in 2019, culture matters more than economics. It really, it just.
My libertarian background, I went to George Mason and studied economics there, which is like basically the number 2 capital of libertarian thought in the whole country after the University of Chicago. And it's actually only gotten, I say worse now. It's only gotten worse since I left. But this idea of regulating the markets just grates me. Right, because of my training and my background and such. But I watched a monologue from Tucker Carlson the other day, an old one, but I came across it again, and it was where he went on for about 15 minutes about free markets are not a religion, and they're not the goal. Free markets are not the goal. The goal is some other metric of human happiness, success, health, or whatever, and that free markets are but merely a tool. To achieve whatever our goal is for humanity. And that really struck me as a sensible, empathetic, future forward thinking perspective. That is, I'm not exactly like a Republican conservative historian here or anything, but like it strikes me that is a new perspective. Would you say that that's true? Like that within the right wing thinking? Because I think a lot of us went through a libertarian phase.
I mean, it's hard for me to talk about what, say, Republican thought was like in, I don't know, the 1940s and 50s. I'm not actually that good a historian of political thought, really. But I do know that in the modern era, ever since, the 1970s and 80s, that is very heterodox, right? And that's 40 years of political thought and political positioning on the right. I think it's overdue. I found myself very persuaded by that point as well. And I also am a big believer, as a corollary, I think the right needs to avoid any self-defeating principles, right? Like if your principle leads to your own political defeat, then it's not a principle worth keeping.
It's dysgenic, as Jeffrey Miller would say.
It's a bad principle for you to hold on to. So if your principle is, we're not going to ever discuss regulating big tech companies because the free market should be this only solution we use to solving any problems we have politically. It's like, well, that's funny because the socialists will win and then you'll get nothing of what you want. Right. And Republicans and conservatives will find themselves continually excluded from more and more things. And by the time you realize that, oh my gosh, we need to actually do something about how the world we've turned into a private GDR, right? A private, German Democratic Republic where you can't say publicly what you want, a privately enforced social credit system, it'll be too late. Right.
Yeah, there's an interesting thought experiment out there about when you make everything free, total freedom and liberty and whatnot, then like tyranny that's the conditions for tyranny to arise, right? So you have to, this balance this essential balance, which is what's been debated forever and will be debated forever.
Right.
And it's very fascinating that we have this this real case study right now.
Yeah.
And we can say we're gonna have to go circle back and wrap up on CPAC, but I want to this is a good time to talk about Tim. I think, Tim Pool, the YouTuber extraordinaire, independent journalist, former Vice journalist, cool guy, smart guy. He's been really working hard to bring the message to the masses, really through Joe Rogan now, about social media censorship. So what did you see happen over the last couple of weeks, and how effective do you think he was, and what of his arguments do you think have weight and legs versus which ones that don't? Because I have some thoughts on that myself.
So I thought Tim was extraordinarily effective. The funny thing is, Tim was hanging out with us a few weeks ago, right?
He was at A Night for Freedom and here just at the party just last week.
He was at A Night for Freedom last week. I think literally he was talking about going to LA. He didn't tell any of us what he was about to do in LA.
No, I talked to him and he goes, there's big stuff coming. That's all he said.
That's an understatement of the year.
Yeah.
Huge stuff coming.
Yeah.
But we were playing Secret Hitler with him the other day, maybe a week and a half ago. It was great. It was really fun. I had a great time. No, Tim did a fabulous job. I think apparently they were keeping it secret because they just didn't know when it would happen, and they didn't want to preview and then have it fall flat. So they just were Tim was like, I'm not going to talk about what I'm doing until we actually are ready to go live.
Why don't you just explain just real quick what happened? For people living in a closet.
For people in a closet. So Tim Pool went on Joe Rogan's podcast with Jack Dorsey, CEO of Twitter, and Vijaya Gadde, the trust and safety lead, so the head of their moderation team, to talk about social media censorship and various high-profile bannings. So they got, this is because I think Jack Dorsey first went on Twitter on Joe Rogan, and Joe didn't really push him on anything. Joe was not particularly prepared to talk about social media censorship,
which struck me as odd.
Yeah,
right. I thought that Joe would know. He's talking to Sam Harris and he's talking to Weinsteins and Shapiro and everybody. You don't think that he had gotten the download on that already?
Apparently not. It's it's not unthinkable, right? You think about, I know that I think myself about being a content producer. We'll be talking later about Periscope, but when you're a content producer, especially a prolific one, you're often not actually that much of a content consumer. I don't, for example, I don't really listen to many other people's Periscopes. I like Scott Adams, I like Mike, I like Jack. But if you say, do I regularly listen when they go live? No, I don't. Right. I can talk to Jack Posobiec on the phone whenever I want. So why would I listen to his Periscope? I don't know. Maybe that's a little overstating things, but
no, but it's true. And even as your content creation grows and the people responding to you grows, you can even just get danger. There's a danger of just living in your notifications and living in your mentions.
Right.
That's the bubble no one talks about. Right. It's you don't even go over to your main timeline or your lists anymore. There's just so many people responding to you and interacting with you that can really suck your time away. So I guess Joe, he does spend a lot of time producing content, but I just would have thought in the conversations that he was having with people that he would have gotten the download, but apparently not. So Tim gives him, Jack Dorsey goes on the show. Joe basically softballs him the whole time, just talks to him about, Joe, so what's it like to run a company, and Jack's the boringest interview you ever saw in your whole entire life. And it enraged Alex Jones, because Alex Jones felt like Joe passed up an opportunity to really dig in onto the issues. And then Alex goes on Joe's show. They make up. Joe promises to dig into it a little bit deeper. And who does he pull up to dig into it a little bit deeper? But our buddy Tim.
Yeah, no, because apparently Tim did a video on why he thought the podcast itself was bad. And then Joe apparently Joe had already been following Tim. They described this on the Rubin report, right? Yeah. Tim Pool went on Rubin yesterday, I think. And so they have this DM conversation, and Joe's like, hey, call me up. And eventually that ended up to Tim being brought out to do a podcast one-on-one with Joe. That went well. And then apparently there was already some discussion about bringing Tim back to go have a combined podcast with him, Jack Dorsey, and somebody else. In this case, it turned out to be Vijaya.
Right.
So that was how that came about. It was an incredible podcast. I think Tim did a wonderful job of confronting Jack and Vijaya with things they hadn't considered. The idea that their rule about dead naming and misgendering was inherently ideological, and a demonstration of an underlying bias, that various of these bannings were overdone or ridiculous, and that also that the sort of the problem of how each of these individual decisions always seems to go in one direction. It's like grains of sand making a heap. Look, like if every single decision you make where you say, oh, we made a mistake, or oh, you have to understand the full context, or oh, whatever, if every single one of those decisions is ending up with the left-wing outcome result, like you're biased.
Right.
Even if any individual decision is explainable. Like if they're all coming out the same way,
right,
you're biased.
I mean, I lived through Twitter bias. I mean, a year ago I got doxxed and somebody like literally engaged in a full-on targeted harassment campaign of doxing, like definition of doxing, revealing a pen name, contacting my employer, seeking destruction of my personal life, dogpiling a bunch of people on top of it, spreading misinformation. I and all of my followers reported all these tweets. They all came back as approved without any problem. I mean, there couldn't have been a more clear case of like violating your terms of service in terms of doxing, targeted harassment, misinformation, lying, actual harm created in the real world, etc. But nobody cared.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people now that Twitter has gotten better in the sense of they are less likely to come up, ban you for things that aren't rule violations. So like in the last year or so, I think they've sort of gotten a hold of, okay, we need to be at least somewhat more consistent. So when we do actually enforce the rules, we can point to real violations and not just ban people arbitrarily.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that they enforce the rules against everybody equally.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. So it's like basically what it means is if the rules apply to you as a conservative, they don't apply to the liberals. And, I do tell people that it's like, but that,
yeah,
right?
Right.
Like stop. I mean, in the context of your own personal Twitter use, like the fact that they're going to just enforce the rules. If you stay within the lines, you're not going to get banned. Like stay within the lines.
Right. It's something you have to deal with. And like, I'm dealing with it all the time. I feel as though there's just any minute the hammer could come.
Yeah. And I worry about that intensely. And a lot of people do. And I think one of the interesting things to come out of that is you really did see Jack more than Vijaya, who seemed sort of intensely focused on the nuts and bolts of her job, but like Jack sort of get a handle on like, oh, this is what everybody's upset about.
Yeah.
Right. Like this is why the conservatives are livid, because one, it's just so crazy consequential to have Twitter taken away from you as anybody whose job requires some ability to influence the public square.
Right. Anything having to do with media, Twitter is the only place to be.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it becomes incredibly difficult to do any job in politics, any job in media if you don't have Twitter.
Yeah.
So super consequential to take that away. And the fact that conservatives see it like where the decisions come down whenever there's where there's a gray area, whenever there's an ambiguity, whenever there's context that needs to be evaluated, it seems to always come down with the outcome that progressives favor as opposed to the opposite.
Now, one of the things, and I didn't watch the entire podcast, but I did read some of Tim's follow-up comments. It seemed to me that he was making an argument about fairness, and he was also making an argument about Twitter's terms of service operating sort of in a smaller circle than what the Constitution provides for. And then he brought in the idea of like foreign influence, and therefore we're like allowing foreigners to have a greater impact on our dialogue than our citizens, etc. But I didn't hear him. None of those actually were very persuasive to me.
Yeah.
I didn't hear him making the public square argument, right? That like, this is now a utility. We need to be talking about regulation, and we need to be talking about government involvement in managing what is now basically the new form of television, right? Like who regulates the airwaves and sells cell phone bandwidth and over the air broadcasting rights? Government. Who regulates how much it costs and who's able to get electricity? The government. Also same with, plumbing and sewer, etc. So where is that argument in Tim's presentation? And where is that argument moving forward? Because that seems to me to be the one that makes the most sense.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Tim's framing was interesting in the sense of trying to, but it could have been framed much more simply. Your platform is too powerful to exclude people from. Your platform is too important to exclude people from. Right? That's the simplest way of framing it.
Yeah.
Like, rather than talking about it's important because people try and influence it, it's just, no, it's important. It's the center of all this discussion.
Right.
And to have a culture of free speech in America, not just what the First Amendment permits. Because, like, again, if you think of free speech and the First Amendment as concentric circles, the First Amendment protects a particular free speech in a particular context, namely government infringing on it. But free speech is more than the First Amendment. It's a cultural value that says we should all have the right to say what we think and participate in public discourse. And, if that's why I say, again, you should have the same right to speak on Twitter that you do in a public park. I firmly believe that. I don't believe current law requires that, but I believe that that's what ought be. We ought change current law to manifest that as a reality. And that's because free speech as a value, as a cultural norm, is much bigger than that and requires a cultural commitment to it. In the same way that, private companies could discriminate and it wasn't unconstitutional for private entities like restaurants and hotels to discriminate against people of color. We passed laws because the importance of the government not discriminating is that's only one part of a cultural value of non-discrimination.
Right.
We actually need to have laws that say you private companies are not allowed to discriminate either.
Right.
Same deal.
It is the same deal. And I worry that the free speech is like one of our common stories that we tell each other that unite us in our imagined order, because America today is not an ethnic-based, bloodline, heritage-based nation, right? It's a nation that is held together through what John Robb was calling on the last podcast, fictive kinship. What other people in the name of the author escapes me, but from *Sapiens* about Harari about imagined orders, shared imagined orders. As we all know about, from just living this experience, that we share these narratives and these stories.
Didn't we talk about imagined communities when I was on it?
We certainly did.
Right. Like that's the Benedict Anderson book. Yeah.
And that's exactly why I'm bringing it up again. Free speech is like at the very tippy top of or the bottom foundation of all of these stories and all of whatever our imagined American order is that unites us. And so it's a valuable thing for us to protect if we're going to have a civic nationalism, if we're going to have a nationalism that's not based on blood, heritage, and geography and a lifelong history of occupying the same lands. Free speech is the one that we have to defend.
Right. If we actually, that's true. That's a really good point about why it's so important to defend as a cultural value, because I think you're right. I haven't thought about it this way, but it's actually key to American nationalism.
Yes.
Right. And non-ethnic American nationalism is going to be rooted in common values, common traditions. What is a more common value or tradition in America than free speech?
There is not. I don't think there is one.
So,
yeah.
If you're rejecting free speech or just and the cultural norm of it, then you're rejecting I don't know how you even get to what unifies us as a nation.
You really don't. So. I understand now, 10 years ago, I would hear the phrase free speech warrior and I didn't quite understand the power of it. But all these experiences that we've had over the last few years, all of the learnings, all of the cultural evolutions, technological evolutions, all of it has led me to believe that defending free speech is the key to keeping our civic nationalism together and from preventing us from spiraling out of control into warring factions. However, the irony of that is that this free speech also then sort of facilitates, especially online through social media, facilitates our tribalism, right? And it also facilitates these collective intelligence networks that have arisen and this network warfare that's going on between the resistance and the red insurgency. So it's like the key to it all, but it's also part of the problem in some
Alcohol,
ways.
The cause of and solution to all our problems.
All our problems.
Yeah.
So are we gonna square this circle today? That's two questions now. Two questions that I don't know that we're gonna answer in this podcast.
I mean, we have some other things we want to get to.
We definitely do. We're gonna do that. Okay. So that covered our free speech talk and what was happening with Tim. So I'm moving right back down the agenda. Let's go back to CPAC. There was another party at CPAC that was very important to you personally, and where I had a wonderful time myself. It was on Friday night, and Will is going to take it from here, and he's going to explain what happened. And you have an announcement also that stems from that. So why don't we just go right to the party and right to the announcement, and we'll get into it. Go.
So Raheem and I announced at a party.
Raheem who?
Raheem Kassam.
And who's he?
He is the former editor-in-chief of Breitbart London, former aide-de-camp to Nigel Farage and Steve Bannon.
Oh, there we go.
An important right-wing commentator. And I have purchased the rights to Human Events.
What is Human Events?
Human Events was the name of the oldest conservative magazine to be published. It was at least in the modern era. It started being published in 1944. So older than National Review, obviously older than the Weekly Standard, but older than all of those. Yeah. It had been a actual paper publication until I think 2013 when it went digital only, and by 2015 it was basically defunct. So it's just been sort of sitting dead for 4 years or so. Raheem and I had been looking for things we could do together in terms of a project. We had been talking about a nonprofit, a think tank, various other things. When he remembered that Human Events was up, somebody had told him Human Events might be for sale, and we quickly coalesced around that idea, both because we saw sort of a lack of institutions on the right, prestige institutions that fit in the nationalist pocket, if you will. And also the fact that Raheem himself had been editor-in-chief of Breitbart London. So in terms of finding something we could clearly do that was clearly within our ken to start with,
right?
Let's go with something Raheem knows and
right.
that I'm a part of. So,
and also, I mean, the market's clearly speaking about this because you got some other people out there trying to do something else right now too.
Right, yeah. Jonah Goldberg and Stephen Hayes are trying to put together a yet-to-be-named new media company to fit into what I'm sure is a vastly underserved market of people opposed to Trump on the right.
I think that's sarcasm.
Yeah, a little bit. 93% of the party is pro-Trump, and they want to be Trump skeptical. Good luck, guys.
Okay, so you and Raheem were trying to figure out something to do, and you guys came across the fact that Human Events was for sale. I almost said the wrong name again. Yeah. I have actually misstated the name a couple times, and Freudian something or other. Anyway, so you stumbled across this, and you guys have actually purchased the entire organization, right? The name, the content, the social media presence.
So we don't have all the archives. We've purchased the name, we purchased all the IP. Basically.
Got it.
And all the domains and all the social media accounts.
Perfect.
So that's basically the core of the purchase. We own the trademark, we own the name, we own all the Human Events related domains, we own the Facebook, YouTube, Twitter accounts, and any other accounts we find.
And where does the name come from?
It comes from the Declaration of Independence. When in the course of human events, a free people, blah, blah, blah. I don't even know if that's the right line, but I know when in the course of human events.
Blah, blah.
Whatever, it's the Declaration. It's not that important.
So that's awesome. Okay, so you guys have now purchased. You're a publisher.
Yes.
Raheem is the editor-in-chief.
The global editor-in-chief.
Global?
Not just the editor-in-chief.
Was that your idea or was that
No,
his?
that was Raheem's idea. That was Raheem's idea.
Raheem is not lacking for flair.
No, he certainly is not.
Yeah, and the scarves, right?
Scarves, pocket squares.
Yes, the name of the drink at the party that we went to.
It's called Raheem is Daddy.
Raheem is Daddy. So echoes of a little Milo Yiannopoulos in there. But certainly a way to get attention, certainly a way to raise the profile, certainly a way to get people excited. The party that I went to on Friday night that was hosted by Raheem and Will was sponsored by
a whole slew of people, Project among others, Project Veritas, Open the Books, Friends of Vish, Rob Wassinger, a few other organizations.
Yeah, so there was a lot of support right out of the gate for something like this, right? And how have you found the reception in the marketplace to your announcement?
Oh, it's been remarkable. We've gotten all sorts of people coming to us, offering us congratulations, wanting to contribute, bringing up the fact they have old memories of it. Like even my dad, for example, mentioned that my grandfather passed away about 15 years ago, so my dad handled the estate. And he said to me that he had found tons of old Human Events and National Review, like in my grandfather's study. Like there's just this old memory of Human Events that in the past generation, because a lot of people wrote for it, a lot of people used it and read it as like a big intellectual influence. So there's this long memory of it, and people are stoked to see it coming back. And also people are just excited for Raheem and I to get a project going. Like, as you say, Raheem's a very charismatic guy with a lot of flair. People want to see him succeed.
Definitely.
I've got my own audience that seems pretty pleased with the idea of me doing something instead of just doing Periscope.
Yeah. And I think that there is widespread acknowledgement that in order for this sort of emergent new philosophy, ideology of the new right, or whatever it's being called these days, American nationalist right, whatever, to have any legs, the post-Trump era, etc., there needs to be institutional support, whether it comes from think tanks, whether it comes from political consultancies or lobbyists or academia or whatever. It also has to come from the media space.
Yep. I mean, the neocons had neocons had the Weekly Standard. And that's a big institution for them that, built up a lot of talent. So we need the same thing.
So it's going to be not only a way to distribute information, but also a talent incubator.
Absolutely. I mean, we want to hire people. We want to bring them in as staff writers, and we want to build them up too. I mean, I think a big part of how we approach this is the reason that we think we'll be successful is partially because we've got personalities at the top that people like and are attracted to. I mean, the prestige brand is valuable, but it's not as valuable as having people at the top who are charismatic and that people want to follow. Like, the name National Review was not as important as William F. Buckley, right? William F. Buckley was a star.
Right.
And there really aren't that many stars left in conservative media who like run outlets. I mean, you think of people like Rich Lowry, and not to be dismissive, but he's not William F. Buckley. He'd probably admit that himself.
Right, exactly. So that's very exciting, Will. And you have spent the last, I don't know, year or 2 years. We all sort of came into this thing with this whole Trump phenomenon starting up in 2015, and then the election in 2016, and we're all sort of a bit attracted to not necessarily Trump himself, because clearly there's a lot of downsides, but really to sort of what his popularity represented. Mm-hmm. And we've all been sort of evolving and trying to find our way in this space. And you've been working very hard to build your own audience, and you've been doing that through your Periscopes. And so let's talk a little bit about that, because, dude, you have been just killing it on those Periscopes.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you don't know, Periscope, again, live streaming platform on Twitter. And I do a pretty simple Periscope very regularly. I'd say I try to do at least like 4 or 5 a week, where it is usually between 15 and 25 minutes. And it's me commenting on an issue and then taking questions. And so my setup is unbelievably simple. Like, people are like thinking, I mean, I see a lot of people do Periscopes and they have a lot of complicated layers of production. I've tried some of them and I quickly went back.
Have you tried to dig into like OBS and everything?
Oh yeah, no, I used OBS for maybe a week.
Yeah.
And I went back to what I still have found to be the simplest and best way to do Periscopes of the style that I do.
What's that?
An iPad on a tripod.
Just an iPad.
Just an iPad and like a light.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because I think Periscope is a unique medium as a form of live streaming. I mean, there are ways, and I don't even produce it on multiple platforms. I keep it on Periscope. I might start doing multiple platforms, but there's technical complexity that I'll have to deal with. The core value and the core offering, I think, of Periscope is the ability for an audience to participate in a performance that is totally unique.
Yes.
Like, if you do a podcast, like right now, you guys are listening. I love you. You're not participating in the performance that Jack and I are currently doing.
Correct.
Right? When you watch a television show, you're not participating. And when you watch a YouTube video, you're not participating. You are passively consuming. When you watch a Periscope, and if the performer of a Periscope is interacting with the comments live, then you are participating in a live performance. That's really cool and really unique.
Definitely. And has that experience, that interaction with
it's forced me to think deeply about issues, knowing that I'm going to have to defend them against comments. And if I fail to respond to a solid query in the comments, it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
It's sort of like being in court and you have 400 judges asking you questions as an advocate.
Do the other followers say, hey, you gonna answer this one?
Occasionally, but I'm pretty good about being responsive. I was a decent attorney and a decent law, certainly a very good moot court participant. So I know how to do it.
And an expert debater.
Some might even say a master debater.
That's an inside joke with me and Will. Will is a national debate champion and as well a national debate sort of star coach of people too. So that's where Will got a lot of his skills around debate, presentation, oral argumentation, of which he is absolutely, unquestionably an expert. Mm-hmm. And the Periscope medium is perfect for him because he also thinks very quickly on his feet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so tell me, how do you see, because like I don't see guys that are the editors in chief or publishers of major publications sitting around on Periscope engaging with their audience and like allowing for that interactive experience, this is a very new media, cutting edge medium that you have become an expert in. So how do you see it working together in your sort of resuscitating an old school publication and combining it with your new media skills? How do you see that working in the future?
So I see it. I mean, I view the way that a media publication succeeds is through its stars, right? We just talked about a Buckley running National Review. So part of it is building your own personal profile as somebody who runs a magazine. So that's one part, right? You want people to like you. Moreover, if I continue to do Periscopes, it gives people an avenue to participate and engage with the people running the periodical, right? When I think about Rich Lowry, he engages a little bit on Twitter, but how accessible is he? How accessible is Ben Domenech, who's also very good at the Federalist? There's a sense in which there's this distance between the audience and the publisher.
Yeah.
I think if I keep doing Periscopes, I can reduce that distance enormously.
Right.
And by reducing that distance, keep my audience and the audience of Human Events deeply invested personally in the success of the venture.
Correct.
And that's the thing people don't understand about the value of social media. Social media amplification and marketing works best when people want to help you. It's a lot like high school.
It's like life. It's like
yeah.
It's like personal relationships, and so it's your authenticity,
right?
And it's your direct connection with people that has sort of given birth to the support that you have, and then has fostered it and given sort of the backbone for its growth. So I'm challenging you now. Don't lose track of that. Right. When you end up, Raheem was already on Tucker Carlson, and when you end up at these conventions and whatever on stage with whatever yuckity yuck, don't forget your Periscope roots and that social media connection with the people, because that is what kicked you off.
Yeah, no, I won't. I love Periscope, and I think that my ability to do it gives me a unique advantage. I just don't want to give it up. I don't think I have any particular advantage. Well, a little bit maybe in like a TV format. I don't have experience. A lot of people have a decade or more of experience doing TV hits, for example. I've done one.
Yeah.
And it wasn't on a mainstream channel. So
I think I've done that same one.
Right. I did Cheddar once for Tesla, oddly enough, when I sued Tesla.
Oh, right.
But I've never done one for politics.
Oh. You got to call up Jack. What's up?
Oh no, I've done some hits on OAN.
Yeah.
But like those aren't like talking head hits where you're even in combat.
Oh, that's what you mean. You mean like back and forth.
Like back and forth, any sort of, kind of contested arena, but
soundbite fighting.
Yeah, soundbite fighting. But they haven't done any Periscopes, right? I've done hundreds at this point.
Yeah, I think by virtue of you listening to this podcast, guys, that you're not interested in those soundbite sword fighting, and neither are you or I interested in delivering that kind of content, because we like to explore the issues. We like to go deep on things. And in fact, we were talking about current events, and we drilled down deep enough on at least two of them, where we got down to the most fundamental question, on each subject.
Right.
And you don't get that in soundbite sword fighting.
True.
You get that through having in-depth and meaningful conversations. And so that is something that I look forward to seeing continue with you, with your Periscopes, and with the new venture, with the new publication. Any thought to taking the publication back to print?
I mean, eventually, hopefully, but that would be sort of a vanity project at the end of the day. I mean, I haven't read a paper periodical in years, so I don't know that most of you have either. I read on my phone and I read on the computer.
Yeah.
So I don't expect my audience to do the opposite either.
Yeah.
So we're much more likely to add newer forms of media, like do Human Events live streams and Human Events podcasts and Human Events videos than we are to go paper. I think that creating more ways for people to engage with us personally and with our content is ideal. And that actually gets back to a point we got a little bit off track on, like, why I think it's so important, why to have so little production value.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
Tell
us.
Right. Because this is like a key point. People like think, I need a really nice video and a really nice mic and whatever. If you use that stuff, you're using Periscope Producer or some other fancy program, there's going to be a time delay between you saying something and the comments showing up.
Oh my God, dude. I was playing around with OBS yesterday in Periscope. I mean, it's not just a couple of seconds.
No, it's like 5 seconds.
Yeah.
That makes it impossible to really carry on a meaningful conversation with your audience, which is the entire point of the medium, as far as I can tell. Right. And so then what you're doing, if you do Periscope that way, you're kind of doing a live podcast. And it's not that much better than a not live podcast, right? Like, I mean, there's some benefit to doing it right after a news event hits, so you can immediately get on the air. But the unique value of Periscope being able to have a participatory performance goes away when you use all these layers of production. So I think that many people starting Periscopes are thinking, do I need all this setup? No, you don't. And in fact, it almost hurts it. You need to get good at responding and interacting with an audience and not getting distracted.
I think the best Periscope I ever did was I did right here on my iPhone 6S Plus, which I haven't upgraded because I'm a Luddite.
Right. I mean, I started doing most of my Periscopes on an iPhone. First I did Facebook live streams with just a small group of friends to get used to the format and used to the dynamic of having a comment, having to respond to it.
Yeah.
Most low-tech thing imaginable. then literally, I mean, it's just like I would put my phone in the sort of crevice of the laptop, right? And then just hit go.
I was just laughing at the low tech thing possible being also a thing that involves mobile technology and the internet and on social media.
That's true. Low tech is wrong. Low production value.
Yes,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
Or low effort. It's the thing you have. Everybody owns. So
right.
You own
all you have to do is
just
hit start broadcast.
Yeah, and then you're going. And then I started doing Periscopes, getting amplified by a few people, and now, I mean, I really do believe that I'm not going to change from using an iPad and a tripod just so I can stand while I'm doing it and have the beauty of an iPad is obviously the comments appear larger, so it's easier to read them and interact with them. But that's been the secret sauce for me, and I think so, if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm thinking about starting a Periscope, don't worry about production. Yeah. Just don't do it. You need to worry about content quality and your own ability to interact with your audience. Yeah, I would say for the podcast, it's a little bit different. I made sure to go out, you guys can hear the quality of our voices on these microphones and the recording equipment that we have. It makes a huge difference. Oh yeah, on a podcast because a lot of you have this in your ears and it's something that's very personal. I've been debating whether or not taking the podcast into a live format also with video. Everything I've read about expanding your podcast audience says that you add video to it, things really take off. I've been having good success. I mean, we have had extremely good growth. Feedback online has been tremendous. The reviews that have come in, you guys can check it out at jackmurphylive.com/podcast. I've been capturing some of the best reviews. I mean, the reviews have been tremendous. So, I'm just looking to add new layers as we go on, as we move forward. But the Periscope thing is definitely a little low tech relative, but super powerful. And it's just an immediate connection to your audience. So let's on that tip, unless you have something else, I want to just talk about authenticity, right? Because authenticity, look, okay, I've been writing about this in a few of the last podcasts we did. We talked about sort of the death of expertise. And part of the reason the expertise doesn't have as much value anymore is because the world is too complex for any one person to be an expert and able to say, if we do X, then Y is going to happen. Basically, at this point, the only thing we can do is be like, hey, let's try X, Y, Z, ABC, and then see what happens. And then maybe we'll pick one of those and we'll run with it. So that's why expertise is there's other reasons, but I think that's why expertise has become less of an important idea, because the world is just too complex for us to predict the future and to predict the actions or the consequences of our actions. And we've also had a proliferation of people thinking and talking and sharing ideas. And so what's more important these days seems to be a combination of discoverability and authenticity. Once you become discovered, I mean, that's that's 10 millionth the problem. The 10 million times the problem is becoming discovered. And I could do a whole podcast and a whole series of essays on how do you become discovered. There's strategies and there's roadmaps, but it's not easy and there's definitely some luck involved. But then the authenticity part. In a world awash with talking heads, commentators, and billion Twitter feeds and YouTube, YouTubers. I'm not comfortable saying YouTuber yet, but I will. Authenticity is what sells. Authenticity, and I don't even mean sell. I mean, authenticity is what drags people in, keeps them there, and keeps them connected to your content. So, Will, how are you going to maintain your authenticity as you become the publisher of a nationally known publication involved with people that are nationally, internationally known authors and journalists? You're probably going to end up on boards and panels and at conferences and on the TV and all that stuff. How are you going to remain authentic and continue with your authentic connection with your audience and your persona? I mean, I think it has to be through Periscope. That's the beauty of doing them. Yeah. I think one of the things, so I'm a lawyer too, and in law school, I learned that the best way to learn something was to actually subject yourself to Socratic questioning by the professor. Right. So because if you subject yourself to questioning by a person, intelligent person, then if there are any flaws in the way you're approaching things, they will get revealed. If you haven't thought through something, that will get revealed. Yeah. And so, in some sense, Periscope is just that times 100, right? And instead of taking questioning from a single professor, I'm taking questions from 300 people at a time. Now, it gives me escape routes because it's easy to avoid questions if I want to. And I'm not it's hard to chart out a list of questions or a path of questions that can force people into revealing their contradictions. Right. But at the same time, subjecting yourself to questioning is a way to easily make sure that you're and by anybody, is a way to kind of keep you grounded, because you can get cut down to size pretty quickly on a Periscope if you just don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And you would say that the quality of your Periscope viewer is such that they offer challenging questions to you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They post challenges and initiate some conflict. And sometimes I'm not in the mood for it, and I just, especially if they're obnoxious. I mean, I have a general rule about Twitter and Periscope and everything is like, you don't get to be obnoxious to me in my mentions.
Nope.
You don't.
Or the other people.
Or to other people, right? Like if you're obnoxious in my mentions, you're getting blocked.
Yeah.
Period.
100%.
Like, unless you're a big account, in which case then we're having a debate and I'm going to try and steal all your followers from you.
Right. I'm going to win this fight.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. But if it's not a fight worth winning, then you're getting blocked.
Yeah, totally. And I have taken that same much more liberal block approach in the last 6 months or so. And it's made my life better. Mm-hmm. It's made the lives of my followers better. There's less harassment in the mentions. My timeline is cleaner. Mm-hmm. And I think my content is stronger for it. I certainly maybe 2 years ago would have said like, oh, blocking, that's for babies. And also back then, I think many of us believe that the conflict is attention model was the right model. Mm-hmm. But I think that has moved into the background somewhat.
Yeah.
Especially with people at your sort of social capital level and down for sure. Mm-hmm. But the battle is with the ideas and with the events and with the big people at the top.
Right.
And that kind of conflict still works.
Yeah, that kind of conflict still works. And if the conflict is substantive, right? If you're posing a substantive challenge, then I'll answer it. But if you're just being an asshole, then you're getting blocked.
Right.
And I just don't hesitate. And I think it's important to your followers. It's generous, right? If somebody is an asshole enough to annoy you, they're certainly annoying the people who want to read you.
Right, definitely. You got to stand up for your people, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like an act of leadership, I think, these days.
Yeah. And people don't block enough. They should block more.
Block more. Block more.
Mute less.
Well, yeah, totally. Because if you mute them, you can't see the way that they're harassing people in your mentions and whatnot.
Right.
Okay, so I think we made it through most of the items on our list. I think we're going to jettison some of the other ideas because we've had a really substantive conversation on a number of items. And I'm just really happy for you, dude. Mm-hmm. Congratulations. I mean, this is a major announcement. You've moved from being just an independent voice in the wilderness here into owning a prestige media name and partnering up with somebody who is first rate in Raheem and his background and experience. And the future just got a lot different for you, didn't it, my friend?
Oh, yes, it did. Yes, it has. I mean, I'm very, very excited and can't wait to see what we're able to accomplish.
Yeah.
With human events.
I'm excited for you too, man. I'm feeling some good energy out there. I know that Ali Alexander and his crew with Culture has really made a splash lately. They're really moving in the right direction. Will, you are too. I've got great momentum here on the podcast. The guest list has been tremendous. The information that we've delivered has been fantastic. The topics that we've explored, the most meaningful and important conversations that we're having in the country today, really. In every podcast, we seem to be able to get down to fundamental question affecting our society and have a conversation about it that is digestible, that is understandable. I know some people after the Jordan Hall podcast were like, man, I listened like 3 times and things are just rattling around in my head still. I haven't been able to process all of it, but listen to it again. And really my whole point in doing podcasts like this is to bring today's best thinkers to the table and have conversations, meaningful conversations with them that will help us sort of create a new mental framework for understanding the world around us, because the old frameworks that you were given no longer work. The operating system software in your brain that you were handed as a child, that's a product of the Blue Church and of the early and mid 20th century. And if you were born in the late 20th century for sure, whatever you got from your parents' culture and society is whack, and it does not work. And that is why we're feeling a nationwide sense of cognitive dissonance when we're looking at the world, and it doesn't match with what our mental models tell us it should be. It doesn't match with the feelings that we have inside of us. I think we're experiencing like a national cognitive dissonance on all sides right now, which is why everybody feels a little agitated, feels a little off, feels a little confused. And the whole point of the podcast here is to help us create new mental frameworks for understanding the world so that we become more at peace and we can understand what to do and where to go and how to make progress in a chaotic and confusing world that's becoming increasingly complex. We are, as John Robb said in a podcast previous, we are in the midst of a war that sees no distinction between military and civilians. that is being fought on the battlefield of information technology and social media, where each of us is a participant, whether we want to be or not. We've all been conscripted. You can run away, but it will still come after you. You know, this is a world that's very confusing and very complex, and we're all trying to make sense of it. And that's what we're trying to do here at the Jack Murphy Live podcast. You can please go to the jackmurphylive.com website, sign up for the mailing list so that you can get additional Jack Murphy Live content. That's where all of my best content is going these days. Besides the podcast, is going to the mailing list. I'm emailing like 3 and 4 times a week. Go to the podcast page, jackmurphylive.com/podcast, and sign up to subscribe to the podcast. Follow me on Twitter at Jack Murphy Live. Go to my YouTube channel, Jack Murphy Live at YouTube as well. Basically, Jack Murphy Live all around the fucking internet. Will, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Will Chamberlain, on Periscope at Will Chamberlain, and soon at www.humanevents.com for human events, all the news and commentary you'll need
to understand the world around you. Awesome, dude. That was a real strong hour. I really appreciate you coming over here to Jack Murphy Live headquarters. Thank you to my new puppy, Rosie, for being pretty darn chill the whole entire time.
Oh, yeah.
She's beautiful. She's 12 weeks now. Dude, I took her to the vet the other day. She was 14.5 pounds. I'd taken her to the vet 3 weeks prior. She was 10 pounds.
Wow.
That's 45% gain in 3 weeks. This puppy is exploding right before our eyes. So if you want to see cute puppy pics, also follow me on Twitter. I love posting pictures. I won't post pictures of my kids, but I will invade the social media privacy of my puppy, because we haven't legislated that yet.
No.
But one day it very well might. Again, thank you everybody for tuning in. We've got great more guests coming up. I think I can't tell you because I don't know what order these are going to come out in, but what an awesome way to finish. Thanks again, Will. Thank you everybody for listening. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon. Thank you.